November of 19, back in 1970, I knew I was probably going to go in after I lost my college deferment. So I had taken the Air Force test and scored pretty damn close to 100% on all 4 sections of it. And so when I got my draft notice on the 24th of December, 1970, Christmas Eve, I said, no thanks. I'd already had to, go down and or drive up to Fresno to take the test and the physical for the Army, all that BS. So anyway, on the 30th of December, I went into the Air Force in 1970 and went down to Lackland and spent 6 weeks in basic training there. Got in probably next to the best physical condition I ever was in my whole life. Got so I could run 10 miles without trouble, that kind of thing. Anyway, based on the scores that I had made, I could pretty much have my choice. I chose air traffic controller, and as my first choice, my second choice is intercept operator, and I didn't really have a third choice, so I just looked down, medical administration, let me put that down as my third choice, and guess what I got? I got medical administration. So after basic training, went directly to Shepherd in the Panhandle of Texas. In January, February, March time frame, I went through basic training for basically EMT type training. Even though I was going to go admin, you still had to have basic medical training. While there, I caught pneumonia. You had to march from the barracks to the class every day, and it was like 0 or below 0 with high winds and stuff. But anyway, got through that and got my orders for my permanent assignment to Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California, 3 hours from home, in Bakersfield. So went there, and I think I had 30 days leave. And from there I went home every weekend that I was allowed to. It ended up being a 7:30 to 4:30 job every day, pretty much. You had a full call every once in a while. I got moved into handling all of the inpatient medical records for the entire hospital there at Castle. The worst part of which was I had to do all the death certificates. Birth certificates weren't bad. Make the rounds of the wards every morning and find out all the new births and fill out the birth certificates, type them up, get them, sign them, and send them into the county recorder. Death certificates were a little tougher. It usually happened like at 2 a.m. in the morning, and one particular instance sticks in my mind because it was a mother that gave birth, and both she and the baby passed away within hours of the birth. So that was very difficult, especially for the husband and father, to get the information out of him to put on the death certificate. But I spent 3 very, very good years there. About halfway through, married Patty, and she moved up there with me, and I moved off base, that kind of thing. The job that I had, administering the inpatient medical records, I had to send information that I extracted out of those records to SAC headquarters, the Surgeon General's office. And I did that every month, and they gave you an evaluation on how well you did that, how many mistakes you made, and that kind of thing. So after 3 years, I got a phone call from them, hey, you want to come up here to SAC headquarters, the Surgeon General's office? And I was a buck sergeant at the time, and I had a big head, and yeah, I'd like to do that. So I had to re-up at 3 years instead of waiting till the end of my 4th year. So I went back to Omaha, Nebraska, and started working there in the Surgeon General's office in the SAC headquarters. I was responsible for the inpatient medical records for 28 hospitals. Not only reviewing the records that they set up on a monthly basis, which was usually about 7,000 or 8,000 inpatients throughout those 28 hospitals, but also had to visit them to make sure that a month or 2 before they went through their ACH accreditation, to make sure that the medical records were up to par and they wouldn't lose their accreditation. I visited every one of those 28 hospitals except for the one in Anderson, Guam, the communication with them quite frequently, but never flew to Guam to check out their records. About 2/3 of the way through my 3 years there, I got a new supervisor, and he and I didn't see eye to eye on the job or personalities, and I applied for assignment to some choice bases, right? Never heard a word. Finally, I got on the phone to Randolph Air Force Base and found out that my little IBM card had been pulled out of the deck and never was being considered for an assignment. So using some connections I had made, I got it put back in there, and then I volunteered for worldwide. Probably within 60 days, I had an assignment out of there going to Incirlik, Turkey. This was about the same time, roughly, that Vietnam had wound down and stuff. So I spent my Vietnam era years in Turkey, which we call, and excuse my French, and it's going to be recorded, we call it the asshole of the world. And it really was. There, if you happen to be in a car traveling on the street, and one person in that car had a marijuana cigarette on them, but you didn't, and the car got stopped, you got a year in jail, and they got 6 years in jail. That's how tough the Turks are on drugs. And in the job that I had there in the hospital at Incirlik, Detachment 47, one of the things we did was weekly we went down to the jail downtown, taking blankets and cartons of cigarettes and stuff that the GIs that have been jailed, they could use to barter with the guards to get maybe a little more meat, or maybe get some meat in the soup that they were given each day, and that kind of thing. And that's how we kept them for a while. There was actually one instance where a guy hit a sheep when he was traveling along between the city and the town and the base, and we got him out of there on the next flight out of the base, because otherwise he would have gone to jail. It's so crazy over there in Turkey. Actually, the entire Middle East is pretty much similar. But it was quite an experience. When I was due to either extend my enlistment or get out, I chose to get out. And I chose to get out in Turkey instead of coming back to McGuire and spending a couple weeks out process in McGuire on the East Coast. So I actually separated there in Turkey, and then I had to find my way back to the U.S. from East Coast to the West Coast. All in all, I think it was a fantastic experience. Spending 7.5 years in the Air Force, it went from basically 8-hour-a-day job outside after basic training to 24/7 practically when I was over in Turkey. One thing that I will talk about while I was in Turkey is that, if you have to have a recall of the troops, everybody to come back to base, for either an inspection or emergency of some kind, you've got to have a recall roster and a means of which to implement that. Well, in Adana, which is the Turkish city that the base is just outside, there's very few telephones. And so very few of the GIs, mostly officers, were the ones that had phones downtown. And most of those officers were doctors or maybe medical people. And to get them to agree to accept a phone call in the middle of the night and then to stop at 2 or 3 other apartments on their way back to the base to get this two-striper to come in along with it was a little difficult. But we got the job done. When I was stationed there in Turkey, it was shortly after Turkey and Greece had gone to war over, I think it was Crete, and the way we got them to stop the war was we stopped shipping parts, airplane parts, F-4 parts to Turkey. So they were kind of mad. They didn't, kick us off the base, but they wouldn't let us do a lot of things, one of which was we couldn't receive mail for quite a number of months. And then afterwards, we could never receive packages. And so anything, after they lifted the ban on mail, anything you could put in an envelope, we could get. So I had Patty send me some blow pops. You couldn't get blow pops, you know, the kind with a Tootsie Roll Pop inside or a bubble gum inside. You couldn't get anything like that there. But what you could get, you could get a case of beer for $2. You could get a carton of cigarettes for 50 cents. You know, so we did have some parties there. After hours, in Turkey, I started working at the theater. Started out as janitor, going on the trash out every night after midnight, you know, when this last show was over. And I moved to ticket taker, and then I moved to managing the theater for a while, handling all the money. It was part of the Army Air Force Exchange service. And anyway, it was quite an experience. I never had to shoot a gun outside of basic training. And it was, for the most part, it was, like I said, an 8 to 5 job, 8 hour day.